Hi, everybody. Welcome to Loss Leaders. I am at Bereave HQ2 today, at home in the home studio, if you will. We've got some stuff going on in the office, and it was just going to be too loud. So I came home to make sure that we're doing this the right way. Really, really excited today. I think we're somewhere in the range of like our 40th or so episode here, which is super cool. And thrilled to have a great guest, of course, with us. If you haven't caught us on Spotify, we've got all these episodes on Spotify. They're also recorded on our website. I am live from Indianapolis, Indiana. Jen, where are you today?
As of 6 days ago, Justin, I am coming to you live from Bellevue, Colorado, which is just outside of Fort Collins, north of Denver.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why? What happened 6 days ago?
Oh, you might notice some boxes in my background. We just moved. My family and I moved closer to town and my kids' school, and it was a great move. But we are definitely still not unpacked.
Yeah, that's moving is one of those things that I don't wish upon anybody. It's a short-term pain usually. It's an ending pain, as my wife would say. But
Yeah.
goodness, the interruptions and getting resettled is a pretty difficult thing to do. If you're listening and you're whether you're in Indianapolis or in Bellevue or Fort Collins or anywhere else in the country or world, and you want to tell us where you're coming from, we are monitoring the comments. Would love to see where people are today, where you're listening from. Maybe you're out on a walk today, which could be super cool, just listening in, or maybe you're viewing, sitting at a desk. Maybe even multitasking, but we'd love to see where you're calling in from. We typically have people coast to coast, sometimes abroad. All of it is really exciting to see. So feel free to say hi when you get a moment. We'll take about 60 seconds as people get logged in. But while we do that, just really excited that you're here with us today. As always, I'm Justin Clifford. I work at Bereave. I'll be your host today. If this is your first time to Loss Leaders, this program is really centered around how companies could and we think should step up when loss occurs in the lives of their employees. And the reason we do these programs is because we're on a mission to help companies really provide the absolute best possible bereavement response when their employees suffer a loss. And in that pursuit, we get to meet incredible people that can just bring so much education to business leaders that are working to build a more compassionate, empathetic, thoughtful workplace. So this is our effort to not hog them and to get them in front of you, because there's a lot to learn from the folks that we have on this program. As I mentioned, the chat is open. Please feel free to use it. I'll monitor it as closely as possible. I'll pull up questions as we go. So if you have questions for Jen, this is a great opportunity to get her insight. We'll go to about 45 past the hour. Recording will automatically kick in via LinkedIn, but we'll make sure to get those out to you with the show notes and all of that stuff probably before the end of the week, maybe early next week. I don't know what day it is. I think it's Wednesday, right, Jen? Wednesday?
Wednesday.
Yeah, we can get this out by the end of the week. Great. I thought it was Tuesday earlier today. Elijah had to correct me. So now you're here for Jen Henderson. Jen is the founder and CEO of Tilt. If you don't know Tilt, you can go to their website right now, ourtilt.com, I believe, right? Ourtilt.com.
HelloTilt.com. You'll find us. Yep.
Hello Tilt. That's right. HelloTilt.com. I screwed that up. I told myself I wasn't going to do that. And Jen's company and platform, they're a leave management company. So they help companies really are redefining what leaves of absence can look like and probably should look like. I have plenty of things to share in my life where I have screwed them up or spent a ton of time doing all of the things that Jen and her company help companies make easier. So really excited to talk about kind of the state of leave today, how to get leave right, the why it's important, not just to the employee, but also the business. Really thrilled that Jen Henderson from Tilt is here today. Welcome, Jen.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. I love that we get to have this conversation out loud and in the open, because we have had many, one-on-ones where we nerd out on all things companies, leave, bereavement. And so this feels really exciting. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, well, excited to have you, and I know for a fact the reason that you're here is because you've made an impression on me and Bereave, and just by the way you approach business, the work that Tilt does, of course, but also how you are growing Tilt and how thoughtful that you are around and how generous you are with the things that you've learned and sharing with us. So couldn't be more grateful to have you here. Let's just let's level set real quick.
Right.
You've worked for some companies that people would recognize, and I'll throw Jen's profile into the chat too, so you can connect with her on LinkedIn. But you stopped and decided to build Tilt. Why?
Yeah, that's a big question, Justin. Why?
Okay. Still
Yeah.
asking.
I came from corporate America, so yes, very, very recognizable brands, and I loved it. I did. I loved everything about it. I was career woman through and through. I graduated college early to get into a management development program. You name it, I was all in, and very proud, self-described career woman. But what exacerbated that was the fact that my husband and I tried for 7 years through in vitro trying to get pregnant, and I couldn't control that. So that doubled down on what I could control, which was my career. And so I got really accustomed to promoting every 2 years in the top of the nine box, and um, that felt great, and I was on a good upward trajectory. And then we got lucky, and we had a successful IVF cycle, and I became pregnant. And when I announced that I was expecting, overnight the promotions evaporated. I distinctly remember looking at my calendar on my computer, and these meetings that I had been invited to for high performers for stretch assignments evaporated. I quite literally was uninvited to the table for nothing more than the fact that I was now with child. So that was my first lived experience of what is going on. This doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel fair. But I just turned the other cheek, because after that path to pregnancy, anyone who's experienced infertility knows that that supersedes everything, and that like nothing else mattered. So got back on the proverbial horse after taking my 3-month leave with my son, and then 5 years later, different company, different stage of my career. When I became pregnant with my daughter, I had a promotion rescinded, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back. That led to me, to your point, building Tilt, and it was a very, very long road to where we are today. I had a tremendous amount of learning to do. For my fellow first-time founders out there, especially my first-time female founders out there, there's an enormous amount of humility that you need to approach being an entrepreneur with. And I very much had to drink through a fire hose for 2 full years, really, quite honestly, before I got the first version of Tilt to come out of the earth. So we are 8 years old this summer. And man, as much as it pains me to say it, really just getting started on all the work that needs to change, and new ways of leave. So
Yeah.
that's
Thank you for sharing that. That's an incredible and incredibly incredible story. You're going to change so many lives in the way that you approach things, just even through your employees, let alone your customers, and doing that. But that's, man, I'm sorry you went through that. That's tough,
Well,
and so stinking unfair.
I know you know this because you hear a lot of the stories I hear, but it's not unique. Like, my lived experience is certainly not a rare occurrence, which is heartbreaking, and still happens today. Like, people will say, "Oh, back in my day or years ago or whatever." No, it's still very much happening today. So I'm not a special snowflake, and you and me,
Sure.
we need an army of us to help change this world.
Yeah, no doubt. Thank you for sharing that. You said something there about that you've got a long way to go.
Yeah,
Even after 8 years, there's still so much to do.
yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Well, leave, ever since the passing of FMLA, has been treated as an afterthought. And no pointing fingers, no harm, no foul. It's just been a default, not design component of the employee journey. And by and large, insurance companies have been supporting leave of absences because they're providing typically the short-term disability policy. that is in some way, shape, or form typically augmenting the pay of a leave. Insurance companies are just not set up to handle a leave, number one, completely. There's a lot of variations and stripes of the beach balls, I say, that go into a leave. They touch one stripe of that with the STD component. And they also have far bigger and different things that they're focusing on in their business model. Leave is a loss leader for them, and it's just not their business. It doesn't make them money. So it's treated that way. So when I say we have a long, long way to go, it's what has been accepted as the norm of how leave of absence is managed is breaking bones in a lot of ways to get people to think about it differently, to see it differently, to really embrace it as a competitive advantage and not an inconvenience for an employee. And to understand it is not going away. People are not going to stop having babies. People are not going to stop having medical procedures, having loss of loved ones. Like, leave is here to stay, and it is increasing. It is doubled in prevalence since COVID-19, which is bonkers.
Yeah. Can you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, when we started this wild world of tilt back in 2017 and out of the box in 2019, as I mentioned, 7% of an employee population would typically engage in a leave of some way, shape, or form every year. Today, that's upwards of 15% and growing. And those tailwinds are the prevalence of leave legislation. So 13 states in the union have passed mandatory paid leave, so companies have to comply with leave. It's also been the tailwinds of mental wellness, both recognition and support around it. So we're seeing far more mental wellness leaves, upwards of 200 to 300% increasing and growing. You're also seeing far more favorable leave policies start to become the norm. Whereas when we started this journey, those are premium benefits. They are absolutely table stakes now.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you talking when you say leaves as a premium benefit? Can you give an example of what was premium in 2017, 2018, 2019 that now is table stakes?
Well, I love your data on this, but I would argue bereavement that was not treated as a leave qualifying event historically in any sort of regularity. I think more pervasively in terms of like the prevalence of leaves that we support is parental. So you heard maternity for the longest time. There are a tremendous number of ways to become a parent. And it is far more than maternity, the person who is carrying the child. So when I say premium today or premium then table stakes now, it's recognizing that there are multiple paths to parenthood and offering equitable access to caring for that child, no matter how you came to welcome that child to your life. Those would be two that I would say. I think, again, mental wellness, far more policies prevalent, support welcomed, companies recognizing. Those are three of the big ones. What are you seeing in your
I mean, we're seeing, I think we're seeing companies that are catching up to some degree to benchmarks that were set decades ago by, at the time, probably progressive companies. But the rest of them are starting to catch up and using that benchmark that was established, honestly, in the 1970s, 1980s with bereavement leave as a funeral leave. It was more of a funeral leave, right? Less grief aware, less about grief, but it was like, hey, get to the funeral or produce the funeral and then come back to work. And that was kind of the standard. And now that has become a little bit more, I would say, table stakes. But what we're really starting to see are companies that are building out much more inclusive type of leave plans. They call them empathy leaves or compassionate leave. And they really take bereavement as one piece of all the hardship that life can throw at you. And they stick that into a whole host of other things and put it on a rolling 12 months and say, you get 30 days on a rolling 12 months because life's going to throw stuff at you. And you should have the flexibility to do that. We worked hard. We spent a lot of money to hire you. We think you're the right fit for this. Otherwise you wouldn't be here. We want to keep you. Go deal with that stuff. And I think that is like at the, I don't know, I would say probably 1% of the top. And then there's a big group doing 3 to 5 days of leave. And then there's a smaller group that is still behind that.
It's fascinating to me as you're saying that the companies are so much more willing and apt to dole out tens of thousands of dollars for things like professional development or conference attendance or things like that. That is an investment in that employee, to your point, that they selected, that they trained, that they have made their bet on. But when it comes to creating the space for them to navigate this wild world of life, that's seen as a completely different criteria or investment in that time and that monetary investment, which just it's human.
Yeah. I'd love your take on like why that is as a CEO of a growing company when you and you have a luxury of seeing, I think, a wide breadth of life, right? That not everybody does, but why do you think companies are going to go even on like taco parties, right? I mean, the tens of thousands of dollars that I've experienced that have been spent on tacos and margaritas on a Thursday night, like why is that?
I think the way that it's always been done is a very, very powerful undercurrent of how organizations run. I think that we are creatures of habit as human beings are just wired. And to be contrarian with something like that, where there are dollars and cents and ROIs, are hard for those internal stakeholders who are advocating for change, are hard for those who control the pocketbooks to change their calculus as to how they've always done it. That's my off the cuff answer. I think default is very, very, very strong. And to not have a significant impetus to change some of those calculus or to change some of those behaviors is fighting an uphill battle often. And so, I tell my team a lot, and I mean it. I didn't jump out of the world of corporate America just to try to make leave better for my kids and hopefully my kids' kids. I also came out of corporate America to prove that you can build a company differently by being contrarian with things like that, by recognizing that annual performance reviews don't work. Let's listen to the research and try to do something different. So I think it takes more work, honestly. That's the headline.
Yeah. I think you're right. It's easy to take what you did at the last company and what the last company was doing and run that playbook again and not think twice about like, is this the right playbook?
Yes.
It really takes a lot of work and a lot of guts in some cases and a lot of permission and a lot of, even throw out psychological safety to some degree. Like it takes a lot of that to kind of raise your hand and say, hey, this is off.
Yeah. And comfort in failing, right? And we could probably talk the entire conversation about what some of those ingredients need to be, but you said something really poignant in terms of what you're seeing in the world of bereavement that brought up a thought for me in regards to early days research that I did on Tilt and this wild world of leave and maternity and all the different flavors, that there is actually no medical proof whatsoever that determined 3 months of your typical parental leave. There is nothing in the medical research. There's nothing proven that is the right amount of time to have bonding, in those that are looking at lactation and nursing, nothing. It is this completely ambiguous, like finger in the wind, right? Like, 3 months. Let's
3 months sounds great. Sure.
And similar to this conversation, we've not been contrarian or embraced the change. Some companies, let me not talk in generalities, but in general, we're not challenging it as to there's actually significant research to the opposite, that we need to be far more nimble in understanding what leave could be. Anyway,
no doubt.
I've done a bit of a rabbit hole, but
that's all right. It's a great rabbit hole. I think kind of along those lines, and you've hit on a bunch of the personal, like you said, you're not a snowflake, right? Earlier, but leave is, and the reasons for leave are very personal, are very unique. I've been told to my face that you can't SOP bereavement. And I agree to some degree that is true, that everybody's situation is unique, but there are a set of things that can be done that should be considered every time. And that's how you SOP bereavement or SOP grief. When you talk about leave, you mentioned several things just from a parental leave perspective, and all of the different things that can happen.
Yeah.
You know, whether there's a surgery involved, or I mean, there's a whole host of things, right?
Mhm.
And complications, and like, how do you balance a platform that is supposed to help kind of automate to some degree, automate leave,
Yeah.
or make leave simple with the human side of it?
I had the most wonderful CHRO in the early research days of tell me, Jen, yes, does leave need to change? Absolutely. But the best leave policies in the world don't matter unless an employee hits the manager jackpot.
Mm,
And that
mm,
just it's stuck in my brain. And to this day, it's burned in my brain. And I bring that up in answer of your question because that manager component to a leave is so significant. And what I early days and now I have a brilliant team carrying this mandate on us. What we aspire to do is to create the container or the process for consistency to reduce the manager jackpot phenomenon to the best
mm,
of our ability so that any person going on any flavor of leave, to your point, medical, bereavement, military, parental, you name it, know what is available to them, feel comfort in the water cooler talk isn't applicable anymore because everybody goes through the same process. So it's
mm,
not
mm.
tribal knowledge of, ooh, don't go out on
Right.
leave or there's career suicide.
Yeah.
Um, it's this operationalizing what should be operationalized, in our
Mhm,
opinion, of the process of leave,
mhm,
reduce the fear, the heartburn, the manager jackpot,
mhm,
variability of the management of it, so that the human part of it can be front and center, so
mm,
that we can ensure that that individual needing a leave is educated, is supported, and is easily able to step out and
mhm.
deal with whatever they are dealing with. And so
Yeah.
that's the intention of the technology element of it. Now we are contrarian to be thematically aligned here in terms of feeling very passionate that there are absolutely leave scenarios where a human needs to be involved, a human on the tilt
Mm,
side, meaning one of our, we call them empathy warriors, our leave
mhm,
success managers, needs to step into the technology where it is built to break. And we intentionally build it to
mm,
break. When
mm,
you lose a baby, you lose a pregnancy,
mhm.
you are navigating the loss of a loved one in a way that is just uh, something you've never gone through before, and you just need a human to help. That
Mhm,
is fundamental to how we're going about changing this, and we hold on to that very, very strongly uh,
mhm.
because leave is human. And if you meet
Sure.
it with 100% technology, in our opinion, you're not going to actually effectuate the change that we believe leave deserves.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So let's talk about that manager jackpot, because that, I mean, I've experienced it in my own life to some degree, not probably as emotionally as returning from a leave or going through a leave, um, but also we hear, I mean, we get inundated with LinkedIn messages telling us all sorts of stories. And some of those stories are people who worked for the same company, siblings who worked for the same company, lost a parent, same parent, right? They lost to work for the same company. One of them had an amazing experience because of that manager. The other one had a different manager and had the exact opposite,
Yep.
right? So we hear this kind of stuff. So how do you think about, leveling the playing field, or even training managers, or making sure managers are aware? Is there a component of what you do or how you do it that brings managers into the world, so they can at least have a common language and understanding of why these things are important?
Yes. Let me start by saying I very emphatically believe being a manager is the hardest job there is.
Mhm,
Leading others is, for all the reasons we know and could talk about for days, enormously difficult.
mhm,
And so, acknowledging that reality with something that comes up periodically and often um, unknowingly, like a leave
mhm,
of absence, all of a sudden you have a manager who's spinning all these plates and trying to inspire and effectuate change in leaders and all the things, now has to deal with this thing that they may not have had any exposure to ever, or it may have been years, or any number of other variables. So if we just kind of have an agreement on the lay of the land and then meet them where they're at in a way that we believe needs to be anonymous. So we build Tilt in a way that a manager has their own plan, their own access, and their own resources to be able to get as far into the very basic rudimentary components of a leave that they need to, without any fear of, oh, I'm a 20-year, tenured manager, I shouldn't need to like learn what do I say and what do I not say. So that's completely anonymized, and you can get in there and you can poke around at whatever you need to. And to your point, it is down to the level of exactly what we recommend managers saying and not saying, because the altruistic discrimination that can be out there is very real. Like, for example, we have had more than one manager who finds out that their employee is expecting, and the immediate thing that they say is, "Are you going to come back?" That is their immediate off the cuff. I mean, it is astounding how often
you see it in just society. You know, people say, "Well, are you going to go back to work after?" Like,
absolutely,
like that's the first question. Like,
absolutely.
no congratulations, no discussion about it. It goes immediately to that like, well, what are you going to do about work?
Absolutely. And it really truly doesn't even matter if it's the first or the fifth thing. The fact that that question gets asked for the employee is received as, oh my gosh, I'm now being questioned in terms of my commitment to my career, my organization. My role is now at risk. I mean, the storytelling that ensues with that one question is enormous. Whereas the manager may be thinking, oh, I just genuinely wanted to make sure that I'm planning, but I still hold this person in the same regard. I mean, it is the most simplistic, divisive question, and it happens everywhere. It's a landmine. A leave is a landmine of those unintended shrapnel questions we see all the time. So.
You're saying that, and I remember when my wife got pregnant with our first child, I was relatively new to the company that I was working for, that I went on to work for 6 years, here in town, called Lessonly. And the CEO was the first person I told. His name is Max Yoder, very compassionate guy, great friend, and a mentor. And I aspire to react to other people the way he reacted when I told him, just a few months into this new job with a pretty, sizable responsibility, when I told him, hey, Natalie's pregnant, he smacked the table, stood up, said, hell yes, congratulations, brother. He grabs me and he gives me this giant hug.
Oh.
And I'll never forget that, because like in my head, I didn't realize it at the time, but I think I was a little worried about what he might say or what somebody might say, even though I knew who I was working for. Like I knew, but I was also one of the first people at a very young company to have this situation, this life situation. So it was a new reaction, but he didn't skip a beat. And having that, the opposite of that, like had that occurred, I mean, I don't know how, like the stories that would go on inside my head, like you mentioned, and all of the things that I would come back and tell my wife, and how I would be thinking about it for the next several months. Like that could be extremely detrimental to a lot of things, my mental health, but also potentially my performance even, and everything in between.
I love that story so much. And can we please clone him? Because I mean, goosebumps. And for someone in his position, 10 times more important, right? Because everybody watches that reaction. And so I'm so grateful you shared that story, and please tell him to shout it from the rooftops. We need more like that.
Yeah, no, I will. A lot of people especially in Indianapolis try to clone Max. He's a very clonable human. I'm interested. You said something earlier that I wanted to come back to. You mentioned 13 states had some sort of state mandated leave. There are 50 states, for those that are out there counting. Like, how do you, and it got me thinking about a leave that we had to figure out between a teammate of mine and an HR leader that was in California when we were all in Indiana. Like the spreadsheets, I shared this with you last week, the spreadsheets, the time, the balancing, all of this stuff. Like, how do you think about helping companies like track that? Like 13 states out of 50, and I'm sure those 13 aren't all the same, I would guess.
Of course
Yeah.
not. No.
Right. Too easy. Right. Like,
Way
how
too
do you think about helping companies think through that?
Well, California is the hardest, but so
Okay.
good on you. That one definitely is the most complex to navigate. It's perfect for technology. You say spreadsheets, I say technology. Like that is
Yes.
exactly why we
Yeah.
have built a technology solution for the codification of those permutations of a leap, which there are tens of thousands of different combinations. So we are continually flabbergasted is the word I would use as to how big companies will get managing leave in spreadsheets. It's absolutely astounding. Or whiteboards or any other like 1995 tool you might want to throw at it. It's become completely untenable. Our heart breaks for our HR friends that are stuck using that type of tooling. It is ripe for human error. And quite
Mhm.
honestly, when we bring on new companies during implementation, it has become more the norm than the exception that HR will say, I've been doing this wrong the whole time. I've been doing this wrong
Ooh.
the whole time.
Like,
And
even from a compliance perspective?
exactly, exactly. And we get it. We
Yeah.
completely understand why, but we don't need to do that anymore. Like that's
Yeah.
just it's litigiously risky. It's compliance risky. It's
Mhm.
financially risky, and not to mention all the human elements that we've been talking about this whole time.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly why we brought tech to it.
I mean it makes a ton of sense. And I'm curious, like in the 13, I would imagine that there's not a whole lot of change within the 13, but do you see states making adjustments even like on an annual basis based on whatever legislation is passed?
Pretty much every single one of them. There is
Really?
no set it and
Okay.
forget it. Absolutely. It
Yes.
is such a dynamic space that credit to our engineering team and product team to be able to build the logic, to be able to, I call it Lego blocks, right? You got to
Hmm.
pick this part out and put the newly updated legislation back in. And that,
Mm.
again, to our heartbreak of our HR friends, they're having to comb the legal updates and they're having to stay up to date on these changes, which is just it's untenable. It's
Yeah,
absolutely dynamic every
for
year.
sure. You mentioned at the very beginning, you were talking about like started to allude to businesses that are paying attention to it and some of the progressive companies that are paying attention to leave and getting it right and why it's important. What do they know about leave and people leaving and major life events? What do they know that the other companies who haven't spent time on this don't know?
They know that the business case is real.
Okay.
So either through a lived experience where they've gone through the pain of a leave gone sideways, or to your example, even some of them having the delight and what a difference that makes for so many components of their employee's life. They've seen it or felt it, and they've either done the calculation, had us do the calculation for them on this is not a strict increase in a cost center that we're talking about. This has very direct line impacts to reduced administrative burden, to again the reduction of compliance risk and the dollars and cents associated there, to the turnover and retention component. So they just get it from a holistic business perspective. And I would say those organizations also tend to have a very strong correlation to the CHRO voice being a strategic thought partner. And
Mm-hmm.
that is not your more, I think, antiquated, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, HR is this somewhat afterthought, somewhat cost center,
Mm-hmm.
first place we go when we need to, pull in the purse strings. It is
Totally.
absolutely thought of more as that strategic business
Yeah.
partner.
Yeah, it's interesting. I put a post on LinkedIn this morning because I was at a conference this morning, and I sat at a table with a handful of HR leaders. They all worked for the same company.
Yeah.
I didn't really know who I was sitting with. We were just chit chatting, and one of them, I was asking a few questions about their business, and one of them started talking about um, their acquisition pipeline because they're in high acquisition mode,
Okay.
acquisition pipeline, integration of those acquisitions and what growth levers to pull for each of those acquisitions, depending on where that company was at acquisition. And I found out later, as we're working through this, that she was the CHRO. And I said to her, as she's saying those words, I said, hey, it's very interesting to me that you're talking about growth as an HR leader right now.
Brilliant.
I don't hear that very often.
Yeah.
And she looked at me kind of dumbfounded, as if like, really?
Yeah.
But it was so refreshing to hear. And you could tell by the other women that were sitting there at that specific table that were all also HR leaders for that company. You could tell that they were not just dialed into how people feel.
Yeah.
They were dialed into the needs of the business and really trying to become the connective tissue between those two things.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Yeah.
I feel very strong optimism that the tides are turning to it being, a motto on the side of a truck of our people are our asset to actually a demonstration of resourcing against it, because there is no better investment, in my opinion.
Yeah. So there's some optimism there on how HR is viewed, whether or not they have a seat at the table, et cetera, how they're viewed in the business. Where else is the optimism coming from that you're just like still going after 8 years and you want to go and continue to make a dent in this space?
Well, I do think that the compliance and state level legislative tailwinds have certainly helped force the hand of companies to pay attention, which I'm here for, and feed into the optimism of where we're going from a sole country in the industrialized world to be lacking a federal level paid leave program, which not very proud of our country for that. But the states are taking it into their own hands, which I'm here for, and I think that is a very optimistic trend. I would also say, having professionally grown up through an organization that really demonstrated how the private world can effectuate change at a societal level, I think some of these companies are making waves and really demonstrating how treating leave differently, treating leave as a competitive advantage, and treating leave as humans need it to be, matters. And it truly does change the culture of organizations. And that's contagious. HR leaders talk. HR leaders talk in the best of ways. And so I'm here for the groundswell of organizations, as well as the compounding forcing function of states mandating that there are paid leave programs. So I think both in our favor.
Amazing. That optimism, I'm sure, goes out quite a ways. But thinking, looking back 8 years, seeing the progress, thinking about the groundswell that you're feeling, and then looking forward to that, like, let's call it a 3 to 5 month window. What should HR leaders start preparing for now that they might need to hear from you so that they are ready in 3 to 5 years as the groundswell continues?
Well, nothing in legislative land moves quickly. So we got some years ahead of us, to your point. But we have companies in our portfolio that are as small as 10 to 15 employees. And what I would say to those HR representatives out there of any shape and size of organization is you're never too small to start doing leave right. Because it's not if, but when the mandated legislation comes. Sure, we've got some years to go, but that should not preclude doing leave in a way in which you're treating your team as if you'd want to be treated if you were going out on a leave of absence. So while I do strongly believe with pretty much certainty the legislation will continue to come in whatever velocity it comes, today you can effectuate change. And to your example, also, if you have any employees doing business or living in other states, you want to make sure that you're aware as to where these 13 states are, and people move. So you may just want to have that offensive posture of being ready and not surprised as to how you're going to scramble to navigate a leave in a state that you may never have done that in before.
Yeah. Go play offense. I love it.
Yeah. Yes. Defense in this leave world is miserable.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. And I just, even as you're talking about it, that one spreadsheet just keeps coming into my vision. And hot dang, if we didn't have one of the best and brightest on the HR side, and a very patient, understanding woman on the other side of that to help navigate that for the first time with us. Thank you for this. As people are thinking about, like, shoot, where do I start? Like, I don't know that I can necessarily request a demo of Tilt just yet. I have to have all these foundational conversations or foundational thought, or prepare in some fashion. Like, what advice would you give people who are thinking about this and need to start acting, but really don't know where to begin?
I think it all starts with, what is your policy? A large part of what we do with new customers is evaluation against benchmarks and best in class as to what policy language is, what inclusions, what exclusions there are. And if you haven't dusted it off in a while, that's a great first step. Dust it off and see where you're landing in terms of where you want to land. Are you our top quartile? Are you benchmarking for middle of the road, et cetera? I think anyone can do that. And you certainly don't need Tilt to be able to do that. And then from there, I really tend to say, go talk to your people. So what is it that's being talked about, again, around the water cooler or the tribal lore, as to how leaves show up in your organization? Are people saying, very often we hear, particularly men going on a parental leave or paternity leave, that while it may say in writing, you get X number of weeks or months, that is not what the culture says. And so try to unearth some of those biases, either explicit or implicit, and get the data collection. And then from there, you have an informed path forward as to where are you starting and where can you potentially shore up either inconsistencies or lack of knowledge, or level up the policies that you have. But those are three pretty, any organization, low-hanging fruit is what I'll say, and talk out of the other side of my mouth and say, there's a lot of work to be done, so I'm not being flippant about it, but it's doable, and you don't need a vendor, you don't need technology to be able to start to understand where you're standing.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think that was your second bullet of going to talk to people. I will vouch for that. I went and talked to parents who went on leave, particularly women who went on maternity leave from our sales team, and found out there was all sorts of things outside of the fact that we were offering, I think, 90 days paid, which we thought, like, hey, what else do you need to do? There was a lot more to the experience that we didn't understand, all the way down to ramping back in with quota and lead generation, and what do you do with big deals, and all of these things that even down to, like, hey, am I being penalized in my career for taking this? And I will go on record anytime to say that nobody should ever be penalized in their career for building a family, or really anything that has to do with life. But the question abounds, right? And just by having those conversations, we went from something we thought was really good, and frankly was, from our benchmarking, was probably best in class, to something that just blew best in class out of the water because it was the right thing to do. And it was a massive boon to just the P&L with some top performers.
Nice. I love that story. And I would be remiss to say that I think organizations immediately go to the dollar signs and the time away, when in actuality, like 90 days, an extra month, it is a blip. It's a blip, and it means the world to the person. So having that just real grounding element of, is it 3 months? Is it 4 months? Is it whatever that might be? It's going to go by so fast, and it really, in the grand scheme, doesn't make that much of a difference.
Yeah. And that's an easy case to make, especially with top performers on a sales team. You can just roll that out 2 years and figure out what the difference is in performance versus an extra month of comp.
Absolutely.
Well, Jen, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much. You gave me, and I'm sure plenty of other people, so much to think about. I'm going to come back to the recording. I got to pull out a few snippets of things to kind of work into my my pitches, my conversations, and I'll give you credit across the board. Don't worry.
Only if it's good. Only if it's good and smart. Otherwise, you
fair enough. Fair enough. Otherwise, you can have it. Right. This is wonderful. Thank you for your just your partnership to Bereave, your generosity with your time and your insights, and really appreciate you and what you're doing.
Likewise. Love to have friends in the space, and this was tons of fun. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So for anybody out there watching, we will follow up in an email by Friday with the recordings. Jen's information, where you can find her, she'll be copied on that email as long as I get her permission to do that. Link to her LinkedIn, and then obviously where you can find more about Tilt. And pay attention to us on LinkedIn, because you're going to start seeing clips of people like Jen specifically in the near future, and helping promote the work that companies like Tilt and leaders like Jen do. So really excited that you were here. Thanks for being here. And until next time, we'll talk soon.
Awesome. Thanks.